Today I have the opportunity to talk with Samantha Flax, and she is in the coolest part of sales, which is ad sales. And so, as you know, some of us don't want ads, but actually, in these streaming platforms, when she shares where she has worked, this is when we actually want the ads because we want to learn something new and engage with the brand. So, welcome, Samantha.
Hi, Marva. Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us more about if you are able to say some of the brands you work for, because you have worked for household names. And what I also think is super interesting is you started working there pretty early on, and so you actually helped build the brand and in a competitive way.
Hi, Marva. Yes, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. A little bit about myself. I've been working at large tech companies over the last 10 years, where I've worked at Reddit, Twitter, Pinterest, Google, and I've supported multiple industries, multiple different size of clients. I've worked on everything from enterprise clients like Amex, Booking.com, to small D2C brands as well. And I've worked across both brand marketing and performance
That
marketing.
is fantastic and super interesting and relevant to our audience here today. Really what we want to dive into is that early part of the sales cycle when you're trying to uncover, when we call it pain, and I'm really more of a fan of insights and bringing new ideas, but really, especially with these brands that you've worked for, you haven't earned the right yet to sell something new and a new insight in a new market. So you really need to find cost savings or speed or some other aspect that's very tangible that can get the relationship off to a great start. So it would be great if you could kind of walk us through how you have been successful with this early stage finding that pain. And I'd love to probably start with the challenge first, and then we'll go to the positive part. So what challenges did you encounter that maybe you didn't think about?
That's a great question, Marva. So, at the end of the day, I think that challenges can stem from various places, but miscommunication is a really big one, and having a lack of clarity with what the client is trying to achieve or what their main challenge is. So, a good example of this, to give you an idea of what I do, is when I have an initial discovery call with clients, I always ask what their main challenges are, but I'll ask multiple questions to really get to the root of whatever that challenge is. So, for example, being that I work with large companies, large enterprise companies, often they'll have various marketing teams with different challenges or different goals. And so when I'm meeting with one team, I'm asking not only what your key KPI is, but how does that ladder up to the overall company's goal, so I can make sure whatever I'm working towards with them is not only going to help them achieve their goal, but it's also going to drive long-term value for the larger company. It's critical to do this because I've been in various situations where I've been working with a client and they've told me what their challenge is or what their goal is, and I've structured a strategy around that particular goal. We've launched an ad campaign, and then during the campaign they'll tell me that the goal actually changed and the entire strategy no longer contributes towards executing that goal, and then we've had to basically change the strategy mid-flight, and it didn't yield the overall success that we wanted it to. So it's really important to understand how the team you're working with, how their goal ladders up to the larger company goal, because ultimately the goal always needs to drive impact towards the bottom
Right.
line.
And what's also interesting what you said is, and especially in the area that you're at, where you might plan, and everything is perfect, but it could be electrical issues, it could be another brand, it could be the major news, it could be a lot of things that could change this campaign in flight. But your ability to pivot, whether it turns out great or not, is probably going to earn you trust, especially if it's a new client. So it'd be interesting to know of where this quote fail actually, because you owned up to it or they saw how you were responding, turned into positive business.
Great question. So I can think of a particular example. When I was working with a large financial services brand, they had a new credit card launching, and at the onset they told us the goal was awareness. It turned out that ultimately the goal was credit card acquisition signups. When you work in media, oftentimes the strategy that lends towards awareness is a completely different strategy than what would be for acquisition. So knowing mid-flight that the goal changed, knowing that we really couldn't drive the new goals with the current strategy, we decided to pause entirely and do a postmortem and talk about everything that would no longer work and proposed a new solution that we were very realistic about, knowing that there were some restraints with budget and timelines. We worked to secure a plan that was going to drive the best results possible within the confines that we had. And luckily, the client agreed. And while we didn't hit the overarching goal, they saw how leaned in we were, how we were able to pivot, and early signs of success, which allowed us to basically do a phase 2 approach and prolong the relationship.
I love that. I love that because everyone always expects perfection, and sometimes perfection isn't what people really want. So that I love that. I also like what you said about the budget was really small at first, and then it grew over time. So, we also deal with a lot of first line managers here on our platform, and sometimes they're trying to go after the biggest sale possible to make the number. So it sounds like you're trying to, if you realize like, hey, if I can start with a small project and be successful, and then you had shared that there's so many different groups that if you do well, you can connect with these other groups. And then you can build, and you'll have a longer term and more valuable relationship, but also a more profitable relationship. So I'd love you to kind of talk about what that looks like as a contributor and with your client, but also how you coach your manager around that area.
I think at the end of the day, relationships are really paramount. So to your point, sometimes these relationships will start off small with opportunity to grow. How do you grow? Showing up, being accountable, following up and doing, what it is you say you're going to do. That's accountability, and providing superior service along the way. So even though, let's say, a sales deal you're working on is really low budget, and perhaps it's not the number one priority for you in the moment, it might be an account that will be your number one priority long term. So treating somebody like they're your only client, while that can be challenging from a time management perspective, is really critical. Giving them the illusion that they are your number one priority is really going to pay dividends long term, because if they feel like you're completely invested in them and you're holding their hand every step of the way, that's going to establish a large level of trust. So they'll be willing to lean in and give you basically more responsibility and impact with their goals.
I love that. The whole idea of really how you're making them feel that they're the most important, and the way that you talk about this, it seems like it's truly genuine. There's a lot of people say these words and they do it, and you just know that their heart is not into it. So with the way that you're saying it is, you actually make them the priority and the most important customer at that moment in time. You're present, you focus, you have accountability, and they do get that trusted feeling from you. So that's amazing. Did you learn this from somewhere, or everyone's always curious, like, where did you pick that up? Was it a mentor? Was it a sales methodology? Was it a great retreat you went to? Where did you learn this? Because I'm sure most of it's, at least 50% of it's innate in your being, but I'm just curious, where did you learn this as a skill?
Great question. You're full of great questions. I think a few different ways. Obviously, it comes with time and experience. And I think within my industry, I've learned it's a really small industry.
Yes.
And so not only do I encounter the same people time and time again, but I've been in a situation where when I was first working at an agency, my manager at an agency ultimately became my client and the person I was selling to. Some of my smallest deals at one company have led to my largest deals at other companies because I've been working with the same person, just in a different capacity. And they knew from our previous work experience together that I had integrity, that I was an accountable person to, their objectives, and they basically had trust in me and were willing to lean in a capacity that basically took years to cultivate. So ultimately, like, tr- treat everyone with kindness and respect because you never know when you're going to encounter them again. So that's number one. And that you just learn over time. Number two is you don't have to be a yes woman or a yes man to clients to cultivate trust. If anything, I would encourage the opposite, not in an adversarial way, but in a challenger way. So I've taken a few challenger sales trainings, and basically that just shifts the mindset of a seller to be, like I said, a challenger seller, and you can do that in a few ways. So an example of this is you're working with a client, maybe you're trying to sell something in, whether it's like a net new product or a new idea, it doesn't matter what it is. At the end of the day, they have a belief in something and you need to change their belief. And the way you do that is not in an adversarial way, but basically saying that you not necessarily disagree, but you can reframe their perspective by challenging them to think in a different way. And you can propose that in a way that's like, what if this were actually true, based off of a belief that maybe is counterintuitive to what they're communicating to you. And once you reframe it and provide a solution that fits within that reframed notion, it opens up the conversation in a very different capacity. So that's something I try to do a lot. I think people are oftentimes very focused on their beliefs, they have blinders on, and to offer a new perspective and a solution that aligns with that new perspective also helps establish trust.
I love that. And that's where all your different experiences really shines through. And a lot of your clients you're selling to, especially the industries you're in, they may have been in their roles a pretty long time. How you've seen like the KPIs, again, when you're trying to do this early discovery and have these early wins, have you seen the KPIs change over time? Or are there new ones that you always infuse as kind of your big idea to get them to think differently or at least open the conversation?
A little bit of both, honestly. I think it depends what type of marketing team you're working with. It also depends what company you're at and what your strength is at a company, or whatever the strength is that your product has. So I've seen a lot of similarities across the companies I've worked for. The KPIs ultimately remain the same at the end of the day, but how we can achieve them with different products
So just
is what
walk us through
changes.
in your industry, what are the top 3 KPIs just so people are aware?
What we call full funnel marketing usually consists of like the top of the funnel, which is brand marketing, and that is awareness of a product, consideration of a product, and then mid funnel is kind of like more of that consideration, intent. Are people thinking about moving forward with whatever it is you're selling? And then the bottom of the funnel is what we call performance marketing, and that's driving an actual conversion. So that could be a sale, that can be a lead, that can be anything that is a specific action.
Gotcha. Are you also looking at the total value of a customer? I know that's a new KPI that a lot of investors have been asking about.
Yes, we do look at lifetime value. That can be a little bit more challenging to measure. Um, so it's critical that you have a good relationship with your client because oftentimes you'll need their proprietary data to stitch together with your data to really understand the like true long-term
I
impact.
love that. So, what advice do you have besides, and you've given some amazing nuggets around empathy, accountability? I really like your challenging the idea, but it's more to break a mindset, not to break the idea. So, is there anything else that you top one or two that you would also want to share with people?
First and foremost, relationships matter more than anything. So I like to emphasize that. But the second thing is I've learned that the hardest worker isn't always the most successful person. Not that you shouldn't be working hard, you should be, but what you need to do is be really laser focused on what your goals are and then create a strategy of how you're going to get to those goals in a streamlined way. So it's really critical to think through the elements that are going to drive those results and basically focus on that and get rid of all the noise around
Yes,
you.
your attention, your focus must be incredible. That I love that. In one of my favorite industries, shopping. And as we know, there's seasonality to the industries you're dealing with. And also, you had talked about the total life of a customer, the lifetime of a customer, and what that looks like. So I'd be curious in this fast moving digital advertising world that we have, and really real time, you're also selling real time in a lot of ways as well. How does seasonality play in there, and how do you think about that with your clients?
Seasonality plays a massive role. So when you're looking to sell something new or start a new relationship or propose a big new strategy, it's important to think about what time of the year is that more likely to happen. So there are key seasonal moments for certain industries or brands. So for example, we know retail or shopping, for example, Q4 is huge, holiday. So we know that there are usually larger marketing budgets for that time of year, whereas January, February, March is going to be a lot smaller. So if you're proposing a big strategy that has a big price tag, odds are you're going to want to start that planning mid-year to support buy-in for holiday. Other brands, other industries have different seasonal moments that are important. So B2B, for example, I've worked on a lot of like tech B2B brands. Counter to shopping, Q1 is often their biggest moment, and their Q1 often starts in February versus
Right.
January. So they're on a different fiscal calendar, and knowing that, I tailor my outreach for B2B clients a little bit differently than I would for shopping clients. So I just try to prioritize my outreach, how I'm forecasting budgets internally based off of what my client list looks like and what their key times of year what their key times of year are.
So people are so busy, as you said, and really focus not just for yourself, but for your clients and potential clients is really important. So time is of the essence. So these early meetings, you might get one shot in the room. So how do you plan ahead from everywhere from the initial prospecting to when you get that time with that potential client? What do you do?
Prep is very important. So every meeting you have with somebody, it's critical to be providing some sort of value. And in order to provide that value, you need to understand what are these client challenges, what are their goals, and sometimes it's challenging to find that information, but more often than not, it's not that challenging, and you can do it a few different ways. So of course, earnings reports, if they're a public company. If they're not a public company, just doing some research on the general industry, like the headwinds, the tailwinds, and then structuring your product solution around that is going to drive impact for sure. So let's say from doing some research, you found out what the challenge is. I then like to come to that meeting with insights of how my product has solved those challenges for other partners,
Oh,
or a proactive opportunity that we can explore together based off of those
I love
challenges.
that. And would you, and I'd be curious for you to share with people, when do you share that information or offer that information in the meeting? Is it right at the beginning, middle, or end?
Usually middle or end. So I like to start every meeting with discovery questions. If they're not engaged, I'll maybe show some of that information up front to hook them and to get them interested and basically give them something to react to. So sometimes that can facilitate the conversation a little bit more seamlessly. Other times I have open-ended discovery questions I'll ask, and that will help me better present that information at the tail end of the meeting with context that they're giving me.
Love that. I'm also curious, a lot of people have tried, especially since you're selling to brands, they've tried, I don't want to say gimmicks, but they sort of are gimmicks, where they might go buy something or have half of something and then bring the other half to the meeting. Or they really truly are trying to connect with the brand, so they show up wearing the t-shirt or having the drink in their hand or showing a receipt that they just did from some shopping trip. So have you tried that, and how has it come off authentic, and how has it come off really as a gimmick?
I think always being realistic up front is what's going to establish that trust so nothing feels like a gimmick. So, for example, the company I currently work at, we have certain strengths in certain areas of the marketing funnel. When I meet with a client and they tell me that they want to achieve something within the confines that they're giving me, I like from the get-go know if that's realistic or not realistic. And I will give my honest opinion if we cannot hit those goals. And I'll propose an alternative where I feel really confident. And I think, again, not being a yes woman has positioned me in a much better light to know that the things I'm putting in front of people have confidence and, frankly, realistic results that we can build off of long term. I never want to feel like I'm tricking somebody. For me, it's a long game, and it's not a short term relationship.
I love that. Can you give any advice on, so it sounds like you are very aware of yourself and you're aware of how you treat your clients. Have you had managers that really don't understand this and they've put undue pressure where it actually has caused you to unfocus? Or have you had managers that really get it and have accelerated your work and added value? I'm just curious kind of the balance of that and what you've experienced.
I've had both. And having a manager that doesn't understand that is really challenging. And what I've learned is you have to constantly manage up. And what I mean by managing up is proactively voicing what's working, what's not working, and if it's not working, what your plan is to hit whatever goal it is that you're looking to achieve. And by constantly reinforcing that narrative, that manager over time will start to see your view and work more collaboratively with you versus not communicating, and if something's not working, it being a surprise at the 11th hour, and then they don't really understand your rationale for doing what it is you did over, whether it's a month, 2 months, a quarter, a year. So just constantly keeping them in the loop and keeping them you know, in the loop of not only like what's going on, but how you're thinking about it long term has really helped improve some of those relationships that have been a little bit more strained at the
I
start.
love that. So you take the high road. You're you're communicative, even though you know it's probably taking time. I've heard many people say, "Oh, why do I have to do this? It's taking time out from talking to my customer." But it really sounds like you've thought
Hmm.
through the business aspect of it. That if you don't do that, and then you need something at the end when there is maybe time is limited, you've already provided all this context, so they have more context and ownership. So I really like how you're doing both for your client as well as for your leadership internal team, because sometimes they say,
Well,
yeah,
you actually touch on something, important. Maybe something else I've learned that isn't necessarily as intuitive when you start your career in sales is working with your clients is incredibly important to, you know, show up as your best version and have accountability to them. But what might be even more important is how you show up internally and communicate upwards to your leadership team. So it's critical to balance your time and energy with both. Because it's really going to help you in the long term grow and elevate and be seen as a leader
I
internally.
love that. And also, you're advocating for your client. And I think sometimes people don't get that nuance where it sounds like you really do get that nuance. So you're investing in your own career, but you're also getting that credibility and trust. So when you do need something unique for your client, you're going to be able to get that support and or resources. So that's really well thought out. I really appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Samantha. I wish you all the best in your selling and your relationships, and you're going to do amazing in your career.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This was a blast, and I really appreciate the time.
Cheers.